This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 405, recorded on June 6th, 2019. Here in Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from flooded again, Mike. I can't believe, like, it just doesn't stop raining. I mean,
it's only for the last 2 days. We either have flood rain or crazy hot, muggy weather because of all the rain that's on the ground, just evaporating. It's humid.
And the Missouri has flooded again. I-29 opened up for like a week between Kansas City and Omaha, flooded again, and we just can't seem to catch a break on the water. If you're one of those in those flood conditions, sorry about that. Hope everything's safe. Of course, we post a show with world-class show notes each week out at theaverageguy.tv. Don't forget, you can join us live on the mobile app. Great way to do it. HomeGadgetGeeks.com. Get you there. Want to thank our Patreon subscribers who every single month, I just picked up that subscription for your Patreon just a few days ago, and we appreciate your sponsorship of the show. Keeps that rolling, helps me kind of pay for it every year, and so we appreciate it. If you want to participate, theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. I've got $1 and $5. Super simple. Every month, it just comes right out, and we appreciate your sponsorship of the show. Don't forget, you can join us on Discord, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. We pick up a couple every week. I think we're up to, I don't know what we're up to, Mike. What do you think, 75, 80 now or something?
Right around there.
In that group. So join us, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. We're thankful for all those in the chat room tonight. We were going to talk a little bit. We got some conversation. We're going to make some Father's Day tips. I got a listener email, a really good one. Mike's going to come in with some Apple news, and then Mike's got a little review on some stuff he's been working on. We might mention a little Unraid in that, so we'll do that.
Maybe.
We'll do that towards.
If you guys are good, if you're well behaved, we'll mention some Unraid.
Do that to the end of the show. Mike, Father's Day coming up. Do you guys have any Father's Day traditions there at the Wieger house?
We are always with family at some point. Just depends on who and what. Actually, but next weekend for Father's Day, we are going to be at a hot air balloon festival down with my wife's family down at the farm. So in their local town, they have a hot air balloon festival. Kind of cool. We'll be down there.
Sweet. I'm hoping Father's Day, a new tradition. I'm going to smoke a cigar. I know that's like a huge shock. Actually, I talk about this way more than I actually do it. So
that's a good point.
And it's actually good that I do that, because if I actually did it as often as I talk about it, it'd be a really unhealthy habit. And some of you have been listening about, for that for a while. I know you're giving me some crap about it, and that's okay. I appreciate that. Some of you have liked it, some of you haven't, and that's okay. One of the things, I was even going to do it. So last night I had taken cigars with me. We've had a huge conference going on for Clifton Strengths, my job. And I got to podcast in front of 350 people live, which was super cool. Like, this is fun. Love having the chat room, all those great things, but doing it live and live streaming in front of 350, we probably had another 100 or so on the live stream. Pretty freaking sweet. And so I have no idea where I was going with that. Oh, cigars. So I took a bag full and put them in the trunk, and to try and keep them the temperature down on them, right? Parked in the shade and some of those things. And then we never did it. So that's what happens to me a lot. You and I were going to try to get together last weekend. You pinged me and I'm like, oh no, I'm too busy this weekend. But Father's Day gifts, one of the things I recommend. I bought this a while back, and I think I talked about it, but Amazon has these acrylic humidors. And I think when most people think of cigar humidors, they think of those boxes, right? And in the time I've been doing this, I have found that these acrylic, they have a seal, and they're just dead tight when it comes to keeping the humidity in your cigars. And so if you're a cigar guy or you're thinking about doing that, it does come with a moisture stick. Basically, you put just a few drops, and this thing is so tight. Like, when I put the initial, and you don't have to season it, right? With the wood boxes, you got to kind of season them, work them a little bit, get them worked in and stuff. Mine kind of leaks. If you are going to buy a wood one, buy a more expensive one when you're doing that. But $20 for these acrylic ones. They've got a humidistat right on the end there, kind of tell you what they should be. Mike, it's sealed up well. I think, I don't know, it's probably maybe been 2 months since I picked this up. I can't remember, maybe a month, maybe 2. Anyway, stays at 70%, which is what I like really well. When I first put the moisture thing in there, moisture stick, it actually took it too high. I had to take it out and then seal it up because it was running about 80 or 90%. You don't want to get cigars too humid in there. 68 to 72 kind of is what they recommend. But really cool. Good Father's Day gift. So if your dad or such into cigars, I have found $20. It's been, Mike, it's the best $20 I've spent on a humidor. I also picked up a couple sweet lighters for that. Did I tell you that? Have I told that story on here?
No, I don't believe so.
So went on Amazon, picked up a couple lighters, just a couple torches, and there were it was said 4 for $20. And I'm like, okay. I just wanted them to be able to take them around. You can refill them, super easy with the butane, right? See through all that stuff. Just pretty basic. Punch on the end. So they shipped me 2, and then I got an email that says, "Hey, someone hacked our site and they bumped the thing up to 4, and it said 4, so we're going to send you 4." So I got the 2, and then 2 days later, 2 more came, and they honored it, which I thought was really interesting. Like for Amazon, and they're not, it wasn't Amazon; it was another company being fulfilled by Amazon, but. Really thought that was interesting that they're like, well, I know we said this, so we're going to do it anyways. I was kind of expecting, a mistake was made. You got 2. I don't know. Right. I mean, so they honored it. And so I picked up 4. I got 4 for $20, which is okay by me. I was just surprised it came that way. I don't know. I guess they have to do that. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think they're going to get the complaints if they don't. And I think that, I don't know. This would be a good question for contract law. Maybe we take this and apply it, whether, was the contract for 4 for 20? And if I didn't, can I cancel my order? So probably just good that they did.
It's probably goodwill. And at that price point, you don't want to piss somebody off over
over 20.
Those lighters or they cost 95 cents to make in China, right?
And if they were a brand that had other items, how likely are you to be like, oh man, yeah, you were impressed the fact that they honored it, right? So you might go back and spend more money. It's a good play for them, and exactly, they're not going to lose any money on this. Their profit margin went down a little bit, but works out for them.
Well, it worked out pretty cool. Joe sent us an email. He's been out, and he said, "Hey Jim, made it back onto dry land and reality, and unfortunately, and I understand that, Joe, as well." He says, all the cigar gift shops that I went to in Belize and Mexico sold fake Cubans, which is super common. I've been watching a podcast called Cigars Daily, Mike, which if you're thinking, if you're into this, pretty cool. He kind of reviews some stuff, a little 8-minute cigar video where he kind of covers. He's kind of cool because he's kind of like new school with this. And
what do you mean by that?
Like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like the old stodgy cigar, stuff. And he's like, look, never don't let anybody tell you how you should do it. You do it the way you want to do it. Because there's, V cut, flat cut, punch, right? And then there's a whole bunch of people. How do you light the thing, right? And he's like, just you do it how you want. But so which is pretty cool. I like the guy, and he talks real fast, 7 minutes kind of thing. Cigars Daily is what it is, but. And he's got some video on how you tell a fake from a real, and the fake ones, and are all over. So Joe, I appreciate you recognizing that they're fake. So he said, in any case, I did pick up a couple in the gift shop on the ship for you and Mike. So Joe, thanks for picking those up. We're excited to get those.
Taking over his favorite listener. No, I didn't say that. We don't have we don't pick favorites here, but right now that sounds like a pretty good deal.
No, pretty great. We appreciate that. That's super cool, by the way, for as you guys listeners, when you do that kind of stuff, super nice, and appreciate that. So Joe, thanks for that note. And then last week I sent an episode downstream. I love my daughter being on the show so much. I just put 403 down the channel with 404. It just means I didn't change, I didn't change the URL, and I just copy and pasted the wrong one. So sorry about that. If you got it and you're like, it's a duplicate. I replaced it right away. Well, Sunday night, maybe something like that, late Sunday night. So if you got it, you delete it. It's there now. Just delete it, refresh, re-download, and good show last week. And so you might want to get it. Mike, we've had WWDC come and go. A few announcements. I'm going to just turn this one over to you because I don't freaking care. No, I'm just kidding. What they announce?
So we had a lot, a lot of people who follow Apple said that this was one of the most packed 2.5 hour presentations. I think it was about two and change, and there was a lot of announcements. So I would encourage you guys, what I'm going to do for you, I know that the Apple fandom here is limited. So I decided I picked 4 of my favorite announcements that they made and kind of giving you guys just 4 quick highlights. There's a ton of videos out there where you guys can get a kind of a recap, a 13-minute recap. If you're interested in Apple and want the full rundown, you guys can definitely find that. But they did have a lot of big announcements here, and big, I say kind of in air quotes, because they have some announcements here. They actually announced hardware, and we'll get to that in a second. But they also announced hardware announcements that I think may not sound big, but they have a lot of impact, I think, as Apple starts to move forward in what they want to do. So we'll kind of cover a few here, and so I'll pick my 4 favorites. So number 1, my top favorite aspect of what they announced was sign in with Apple. So I mean, if you guys have been on the web ever, there's always options when you go to a website to log in. You can log in with Facebook, you can log in with Google, or you can create your own email address account, whatever you want to do. So now Apple is offering sign in with Apple, which at first blush, like, okay, great, another way that you can sign into websites. But what they're doing on the back end is really cool here. So we all know that Apple's big push lately has been for privacy and user control of that privacy. So what they're doing with sign in with Apple is when you sign up, you have direct control over what information you give them. And they go even a step further. So let's say we are signing up for Uber, and you're going to sign up for Uber, and you want obviously to receive emails from your receipts, and you want them to be able to contact you with certain specials and stuff like that. Great. But at the same time, those sort of email blasts can get annoying because they're going to send you emails and over, all the latest offers they have and everything like that. So what Apple does is they actually don't give them your real email address. What they do is they give them a forwarded address. So it's some random digit at mailforwarder.whatever.apple.com, some email address that then that address will forward on to your personal address. And each app that you use with sign in with Apple gets its own forwarded email address. It's not the same one for your entire account. And what that means is that if you ever get tired of getting emails from Uber, go in and delete that single email address from the forwarder, and they never had your personal email address. Once you forward that, they have no way to contact your personal email. And so they have a lot of different scenarios where they're able to protect your privacy, give you more granular control over what you do. And, I struggle with this because for about a few months after they started doing the login with Facebook, a few of my accounts are still tied to Facebook, and I hate it. I'm actually looking to see if there's a way to convert those back out to standard email addresses, because it did what Facebook wanted. It's sticky, right? It locks you into that ecosystem where now if your logins are all tied to them, if you get rid of your Facebook, you can't really log into stuff anymore. So sign in with Apple, I saw, was a huge benefit, especially if you're on Apple devices, because you have Face ID, you have Touch ID if you're on other devices where you can log into those accounts, and it's a breeze. So really cool. That was my favorite thing. I think I'm going to use that now. That'll probably be my default sign in with Apple, simply because of that email service is kind of the biggest part of that.
Mark is asking the question, how do they handle email verification verification emails when signing up for a new service?
So all it is a forwarding email. So that email goes, and for all intents and purposes, that email is still going to come to your inbox. So I'm not saying it doesn't eliminate the emails you get, because you don't want that. You don't not want to get emails. You're going to need the confirmation. You're going to want receipts. You're going to want offers. Maybe you do want offers from them. All it does is it forwards that email. So those verifications are still going to work. It's just that you can always turn them off if you ever don't want to receive them again.
So you think you'll move that direction and start moving things over?
Yeah, I think I will. I think I'll start doing some sign-ins with Apples and see. The only interesting part for me that I'm going to see is, how does that work with non-Apple devices, right? So that will be the thing for me, is if it's something like Uber, where I know that for Uber, I'm always using my phone, I don't access Uber from any other device, that'll make sense for me. But for things like Facebook, obviously Facebook wouldn't have that, but that's a bad example. Other sites where I'm going to access it on non-Apple devices, I'll have to kind of see how that's all going to work. So a lot of the details, I don't think we don't really know yet on how it's going to work. So when it comes out later this fall, I'll have to see. But for certain applications that I only use on my phone, yeah, I think that's definitely the way I'll go.
Yeah, cool. What else?
So the next thing, and I kind of is two different announcements here. So number one, they released iPad OS. So before, they have always said iOS, and iOS applied to all their mobile line, right? So you had your iPhones and your iPads both running on iOS. So now they've announced that they're shifting and breaking out iPad into its own operating system. Now, there are a bunch of other features that they announced with iPad OS that we won't get into. Some highlights were multi-window of the same app. So, for example, if you're comparing two Word documents, or if you're using Pages from Apple, you can actually have two different windows of the same application up, just like you would on a desktop. Before, that hasn't been possible. Things like that make sense on an iPad, which is the larger screen where you can actually do some of that stuff. But I think really what the big kind of overarching theme here is that they're finally admitting and they're working towards making iPad a completely kind of different system, and they're not locking it into have to be the same as the iPhone. And I think that's been the big limitation of the iPad, and people have been complaining that you have this iPad with all this horsepower. When you look at the specs of an iPad, it's actually a really powerful machine, but without a lot of the main capabilities of a desktop, you're never utilizing the full power. It's been my main complaint about the iPad. It's really why I haven't utilized an iPad as a daily driver, because it's so limited by iOS. So hopefully, I think some of the announcements they made for iPad OS are good, but what I'm excited for is to see the future of where iPad OS goes, and seeing really the capabilities they give these iPads, and maybe looking a little bit more like a Windows tablet, where on the Surface, where you're able to have a mobile and a full desktop experience all in one. I think that's the direction they'll start to go with iPad OS, is having a lot more desktop-like capabilities built in. And then,
Mike, do you get a sense? Let me ask you a quick question here. Do you get a sense that, I get a sense that iPads, they just don't have the the excitement they used to have around them. When they first came out, like, everybody had an iPad. It was like the watch now. Like,
yeah.
I see so many Apple Watches now. Like, it just seems to be the go-to watch. I don't know. You're a little bit closer to this. iPad sales, they're making changes, so they must be okay. But it just kind of seems like it's a, whatever, lackluster sales. You might know more. Am I wrong on that?
I think we're starting to see a lot more people. So there's a few things to that. I think when you think of media consumption, phones have gotten bigger from Apple. So if you're an Apple fanboy, your phone's gotten a little bit bigger. And when your phone's not big enough, now almost everyone has an ability to make their TV stream media. And what I mean by that is, back in the day, if I asked my parents to be able to watch YouTube on their TV, watch Netflix on their TV, they might not have had a device. They had their cable box and they had their VCR and their DVD player, but my parents might not have had a device, especially on every TV. They might have had like maybe one device that had an Apple TV, maybe. But now, with the advent of pretty much every TV being smart, and just the advent of pretty much everyone now has a streaming device, whether it's Apple TVs, Roku's, they have the ability to stream media on their full-size TV. I think the media consumption now has come down to, the iPad kind of lost its place, especially for people who needed just a bigger screen than their phone, but maybe didn't want to watch it on their TV for some reason. I think now it's your phone's a little bit bigger, and then you have your TV. So that's for the media consumption side. And then I think what people started to realize was, after the iPad lost its luster from being new, there's really, and a lot of times, your laptop is so much better than your iPad for doing things, right? Because they hadn't separated this out yet. The iPad was limited to essentially what your phone could do. It was a big iPhone. That's still what it is until they come out with this new OS, until they do stuff. It's a big iPhone. Yes, there were certain features that it couldn't do, but it's just a bigger screen iPhone. And I think that really lost its appeal with a lot of people. Now, trust me, there are tons of industries where they are still fantastic devices. You think of the medical industry when you're walking around hospitals and people have the iPad, great device. You think of salesmen, love it. Salespeople love being able to travel with that iPad when they're not doing too much entry into it, especially not needing to sit down and type up a Word doc or access file shares. Now, I will quickly mention, since you brought it up, the other big part of this announcement with this is with across the board, iOS, iPad OS, is file management on these is finally catching up to the rest of the world, meaning that you actually have an actual file structure in when you access your files on your iPad. You can plug in an SD card and just go to files and access it like you would on a desktop. You can access all that sort of stuff in the same file structure. Whereas the iPad before was more app centric, right? You had to access your files. Maybe you went to the Dropbox app and you had to open with Dropbox or open with something. It just didn't make any sense. And now everything really drives into that Files app that they have, so much so that even like my Nextcloud instance is logged into Files, and I can go into Files on iPad and pull something from my Nextcloud share. It just makes a lot of sense. So there are a lot of updates there.
I'm seeing a lot of iPads show up as security devices. It's how you sign in to a corporate. You go in, there's an iPad there. You sign in, go into schools. That's how you check in. Attached to a printer, prints a badge, put it on. And I was kind of thinking, is that the smartest thing? But I guess they're probably using the lowest end iPads, which are coming in at like $250. Brian is talking about his iPad Pro, which is not $250, I imagine, right? Those Pros. What's the Pro price point?
You're looking at $1,000 plus.
Okay. Yeah. So it's still pretty expensive in that area, but interesting. It's tablets have, and I guess I'm your typical user where I have really switched 100% to my phone. Like I don't want that. I don't want that big device. When I'm in a plane, a movie is fine and I have an 8 Plus. A movie is fine at that space. If I'm gonna be home, I'm not gonna watch a movie on an iPad at home.
Yeah.
I don't know. At this point, I'm running my RT tablet on the desk as well as a Surface Pro 3. I don't use those like tablets. Like I use them like computers for the most part. So it's I still have that Habitat router I need to plug in. I'm gonna put it on one of these devices, at least for the browser window. But I don't know. I am definitely a phone. It's either phone or I'm going full power on the computers.
Right.
I've kind of abandoned that space. So maybe
that's been me too. And I think a lot of people have done that. Brian's a perfect example. If you have your use case and you get into your routine with your iPad, there are still people who, love them. And, I say that as I have my iPad right here and it's what I watch TV on down here while I'm on my computer, right? Because it's an extra screen where it's on YouTube TV and it plays that while I'm sitting here. So, I say that while I still have this one in a very specific purpose down here, because I usually have 2 monitors where I'm doing work and I just need some other device to play media. So,
yeah. What else?
So I know this is a small part of the announcement, but I thought it was really cool. And this is Bluetooth audio sharing. So the example would be Jim and I are going on a trip together and we're on a plane and we want to use my iPad, but we both want to listen to watch a movie. And now it makes it super easy. Jim just taps his phone on the iPad. And as long as we're both wearing Bluetooth headsets, they use the example of AirPods, but I'm 99% sure this is going to work with any Bluetooth headset. It doesn't have to be the AirPods. You can now share the audio and you can both be listening from the same device. So I didn't know if this is out there is this on Android? Does Android offer this capability? This is a Bluetooth 5.0 feature. So I'm also not sure on different hardware what's going to work with this and what won't, but this is exactly going back to like the splitter days. I remember always having a splitter and listening with a friend to music on the way to soccer games and stuff like that. So a small feature, but I think actually that will probably be the number one used feature from the update from the majority of people. I think a lot of people will end up using that. I think of a lot of times where Hannah and I would love to be able to do that.
I mentioned to you the Bose app will do that. So I have the Quiet Comfort 35. Sarah has the 25s. And so we can use the Bose app to share that way now. Now that's very specific to Bose, of course. If you want any company that's more tight to their ecosystem than Apple, just buy Bose. Like
right.
That, yeah, they are. They're very, very exclusive. Although they do have Android, or they do have the Google Assistant now on the devices as well. I can't really talk tonight, so I'm just going to shut up here in a second. But That's a pretty cool way of doing it too. If we were traveling together, we could. Now we wouldn't, to be honest with you. She listens to some stuff, and you listen to your thing. I'm going to listen to podcasts,
Right.
so we wouldn't do that. But it's a handy feature for sure.
Well, what I think of it for is my kids, right? Because they both want to watch the same thing and they want to share the iPad, but then it's how do they both listen to it on an airplane?
Right.
I think it'll be a lifesaver for kids. Now, does that mean I'm buying my kids each 150 pair of AirPods? Probably. Yeah, probably does. Yeah. All right. And then the final one that I kind of want to mention for you guys is the hardware announcement of the show. And, this is where you Windows guys, you PC guys might actually tip your hat to Apple and say, okay, you did one thing right, finally. So Apple released their new Mac Pro. And yes, I think they're literally playing off the joke that the 2 generations ago, the former Mac Pro, not the trash can, but the cheese grater that they called it, this thing looks identical to a cheese grater. I mean, they literally took a cheese grater, and this is the form factor. When you look at it, looks exactly like a cheese grater. But the new Mac Pro is their new Pro line. Now, this is definitely Pro. And I know there are a lot of users, home users out there that consider themselves Pro. This is really Pro. I mean, this is starting at $6,000, and no one's going to buy the $6,000 version just because of the different options as you go up. You're probably more looking at a 10 to 12 grand computer for the Pro level. But when you look at this thing has PCI expansion. I can't talk tonight either. PCI expansion slots. The entire case removes with one twist. Obviously, it's Apple, so they made it really elegant, right? Twist the top, the whole top comes off. And user accessible slots that you can fully customize and upgrade. The RAM, the PCI slots, all of that is user accessible. The DIMMs in there, you can put over a terabyte of RAM in this machine. Just insane. Terabyte of RAM. You got 8 PCI expansion slots, like I said. And they came out with a bunch of actually their own video cards. And I am not a video graphics card guy. I am not the one to tell you about this. So go listen to Marquez Brownlee, or go listen to someone who's, go listen to Linus Tech Tips. They did a really good actually review of this. They can give you the really good specs, but they have created custom cards if you want for those expansion slots. But overall, this machine, I mean, we're talking about Xeons with, I think, 32 cores, 64 threads up at the top end. I mean, a very, very powerful machine. You got 2 10 gig Ethernet ports on the back, a lot of Thunderbolt built in. Essentially, what I'm saying is this is the user expandable, upgradable Pro that every Mac user that wants and can afford this line and needs this line has been looking for the past 20 years. So it's nice. I really liked seeing the direction they went. It was finally like they just said, like, okay, fine. Like, okay, fine. We'll give it to you. You guys want a Pro, you want the top end. Now it's going to cost you, right? There's still the Apple tax on this thing. Not terrible Apple tax, I think, when you start to do the math on some of the stuff you get, and especially with all the features and the Mac nature of it. But so don't get me wrong, it's not cheap, but for the Pro level, this is what people wanted. This is exactly what everyone wanted. So I think they're very happy. If you are a Pro that needed this, this is what you wanted. And along with that, they released their Pro Display XDR. And again, like I said, not a display guy, so I'm the wrong person to give you all the specs on this, but I've done my research and I've read the reviews of all the right people who do know, and this is the display that you want. This compares to the Pro level displays that they are using in Hollywood to edit their videos. It's, I think I'm gonna get the number right, but the brightness level on this thing is insane. The 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio, I think, is what they said. This display is a Pro display. Now, of course, everyone heard the joke, and it's not a joke. It's real, but everyone's making fun of them. This is a $5,000 display, which sounds expensive, but the comparison that people are making of this display, when you look at the specs of this display, people are comparing it to a $25,000 to $30,000 display. I didn't know that existed, Jim. I didn't know there was such thing as a $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 display. I should have. When you get to the movie industry and a lot of people who need those type of detail on their graphics, I should have known that it was there. But I mean, they're comparing this to some very high-end displays. So pretty good display. But the joke is it's a $5,000. If you want the stand for it, it's an extra $1,000. So they have $1,000, and that's not like an extra stand. That is like if you want to be able to put your display up and you don't have a Visa mount. Oh, it doesn't come with Visa accessible right out of the box. That's $200. So if you want the Visa adapter, that's $200. Or if you want to put it on just on a stand, that's $1,000.
Oh, wow.
But Mark has made a good point. He goes, they really missed a point. Call it a $6,000 monitor. And hey, if you don't need the stand, if you already have your stand, then it's $5,000. That's really what they should have done. They should have done it the opposite way of calling it a $6,000 monitor. And if you don't need the stand, if you have Visa mounts or whatever, you can pull that back. But it is an 8K display. And really the things that it can do are pretty amazing. So those were kind of my top 4 picks. If I had to add in one honorable mention, only because I'm a male, so this wasn't as big for me, but if you ask my wife, this is probably number 1 feature. Really cool. Something they've been asking for a while is on the watch, and it's actually not just for the watch, but they announced it as part of the watch announcement. They have cycle tracking for women. So being able to track the cycle, very important, for women's health. That's a big task, and they're able to put in inputs about, all the details that they need to put in about it. Gives them certain alerts for, if your fertility times. So if you're in your time of your life where you're trying to have kids, you can have those sort of alerts, that sort of data. And for the first time, actually, they separated that out. You don't need an Apple Watch to do that. That's going to be in the health app. So if you have an iPhone, for any woman, you can go ahead and start tracking that data. And, that's been a big ask for a long time. I think that's something, we're a large majority of male listeners. We don't really think about that much, but, kind of menstrual cycle health is a really big thing. And getting those type of alerts and being able to track that sort of data plays a big part in women's lives. So I think that'll be really cool. I actually told my wife, and she goes, "Was that like the main announcement?" And I was like, "Well, it was a big one." She goes, "I mean, it's really cool, but like, I didn't think that would be like some big headlining issue."
I can hear Hannah saying
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah.
Well, and does it have sync with the guy with the guy's watch too? So like he knows when this thing starts happening. It's like,
yeah,
you should
want to stay out tonight. Stay away.
Yeah, just have one more.
Right.
One more before you get home.
Right. Exactly.
Or what have you.
It correlates to the men's watch on. Yeah.
It just sends the alert.
I'm gonna stop talking before I get in trouble.
You should. I'm good, but you're definitely not. This kind of reminds me, these pricing points kind of remind me of like, this is almost like a bubble. Like this, you see these kinds of things before bubbles burst, where companies create the most ridiculous products that are hyper expensive, and you kind of go, this is really, I mean, if this is an announcement and they're really hoping to sell these, is that market really there now? Maybe in the pro market.
Yes,
where
and that's what this is for. They are not claiming this to be. This is not, because you got to remember, they also have the iMac Pro,
right,
and the iMac, and so you can step down. This is the premier product for those. I mean, this is literally going into movie studios, right? That's where this is going.
Yeah.
This is not going to be purchased by the average person. And I think a lot of people kind of, they watch WWDC and they think it's all, we forget it's for developers.
Right.
And then they do need to announce their pro line that they haven't updated in a while, but no. So I don't think so. Cause when you look at the prices for everything else, Apple's actually gone the opposite way. We've seen them in other areas where there used to be a huge Apple tax, and we've seen it come down a little bit. Obviously, you are going to pay a premium for Apple products, but we've seen that margin come down quite a bit for a similarly spec'd PC. So I think we just got to remember, this is for professionals. And when we say pros, we all like to think we're pros. For real pros, the professionals who are doing this for their career, and they need that kind of horsepower.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get it. I haven't looked at the whole line, so maybe that's kind of the sticker price shock. And it is a little interesting. I kind of thought these kind of pros would want their PCs kind of pre-configured. They buy them, they put them in. They don't add to them. So I am a little surprised of all the custom configuration. But maybe I'm not in that space. Maybe that space is in a way where you buy things and then add other stuff to them. It's pretty decked out the chute. I don't know what else I might put in there. I guess you can put a couple more hard drives in there. It's got a couple SATA ports, maybe upgrade the RAM, but in most cases, if it's studios buying it, they're just going to buy it with the right amount of RAM to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, it's the consumers who buy it and upgrade, I think, in my opinion. Maybe not. Like, that's a space I don't know, but that's
Well, I think what people were talking about was like for RED cameras and for things like that, there's a lot of PCI stuff that you could adapt to as outside hardware changes. You need to change your internals of your pro computer to be able to ingest that media or do certain things, or, there's a new way to process and handle that data, and there's a new card that could do that. I think they do upgrade those sort of devices on the inside. But you're right. As far as like CPU and RAM, I don't think studios are going in there and adding RAM or adding CPU. But I think for PCI expansion, that was a big give for them to finally say, okay, we'll give you that.
Yeah. Well, I know it was a lot of people were screaming for it.
And the form factor I really like. When you look at it, like I said, it looks like a cheese grater, but you can get the option for actually wheels on the bottom. So I see people actually, in these type of studios that works well. And it's also rack mountable, which was a big request from everyone. Was I want to be able to put a ton of these in a rack and essentially have like a rendering farm, right, where you're rendering out to all this stuff. Yeah. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, those studios, they look at pricing differently a little bit, right? I mean, you're really bidding out a job or where the services are there, and the customer, this gets passed on to the customer. So the faster you can render, or the faster you can get things rolling on this, or the more capable they are, of course, the quicker you can get it done, and that's your profit margin. So of course you're going for the high end,
right,
on those. Yeah, no, super cool. Anything else from WWDC?
No, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that came out of WWDC, really cool stuff. But these were my favorite top 4 items I want to talk about.
All right, you got some updates on your Unraid box.
I do. You guys know I love talking about Unraid, and I was trying to convince Jim to let me have some time, talk about Unraid a little bit. But I kind of wanted to go over first of all, my Unraid box and what I use it for, and maybe some things that some of our listeners even haven't thought about using their Unraid box for, or just how I accomplish my tasks and what I do. So when you jump into my Unraid box, you got to remember that my whole idea with Unraid was using older hardware that was sitting there that could easily do what I needed to do for a server. And so when you hear the specs of it, it's kind of surprising how old some of this stuff is, or sometimes how underpowered it is. But it works really well for what I need it to. So my Unraid box, it's using a Gigabyte motherboard, really old. It'll be in the show notes, the model. It's an H67M D2 B3 motherboard from a long time ago. I don't even know when this thing came out, but I mean, it's an old motherboard. So, I mean, we don't even have USB 3 ports on this thing. It's old, but it works perfect for what I need it to do, because it has actually 6 SATA ports, which was great on board, and then able to adding in some LGA cards later to add in some other cards. But it's got an Intel i7 3770 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, 7 spinners, 2 SSDs, which gives it 18 terabytes of usable space on the array. And those 2 SSDs are rated to have a 500 gig cache pool. So those are the specs of the machine. Now, when I get into what I use this machine for, obviously with Unraid, it's all about having your own home server. And you guys, all the listeners here are no strangers to home servers, right? That's where the show came out of. So a lot of the same use cases have applied for decades, right? I needed home storage for documents. I needed syncing capability, backup, media storage, media server to be able to play that media out. And also now there have been some other use cases that have come out of it that I really didn't think about self-hosting, but with Unraid, it really does give you the ability to do. So the main thing that makes everything useful on Unraid, and it was the first app that I had never played with before, and it was really a concept I had never needed to play with before, was getting a reverse proxy set up. And real quick, for anyone who hasn't experienced what a reverse proxy is, a reverse proxy, essentially what you can think about it as, is it sits behind your firewall, behind your router. And what it allows it to do is allows your router to open up one port to pass to your reverse proxy. And then your reverse proxy then tells it, if you have people from outside of your network requesting certain servers, you could possibly have 5 different servers sitting behind this reverse proxy, and the reverse proxy knows where to send the traffic based on the domain that you input. So usually if you had, let's say, 5 different web servers, or if you have 5 different servers that need to access port 80 behind your router, if you don't have a reverse proxy, pick one, right? If you're in the environment where you have one IP address. So one IP address, you open up port 80. Well, you can only forward port 80 to one server. But if you need to go to more, this is where a reverse proxy really helps out. You put it behind, port 80 goes to the reverse proxy, and then based on what domain you put in, it sends you off to the correct server. So what I used actually with the reverse proxy was Let's Encrypt. So Let's Encrypt uses Nginx as its reverse proxy. And the great part about Let's Encrypt is it does 2 things in one. It's a great little Docker. So all of these are running in Docker on Unraid when I'm talking about these. Let's Encrypt gives you 2 things. Gives you the reverse proxy, also gives you SSL. So it gives you those certificates for SSL so that all of your connections are through SSL instead of being through a non-encrypted version. So you're using actually port 443 instead of port 80, and you get an encrypted connection back to your server. So Let's Encrypt is like the number one. Get it installed. If you're going to be accessing anything from your Unraid box from outside of your house, of course, you can always do a VPN to be able to get to this stuff, but it's much easier to be able to do it from domains. And so when I talk about that, we're going to pretend for a second that I have the domain Wieger.com. I don't. I wish I did. I really need to figure out how much someone's willing to give that to me for. But so for all of these I'm going to talk to you about, I have Let's Encrypt set up to be subdomains of Wieger.com. Again, I don't own that, but if I did. So we're going to move into Nextcloud. And to go back to our example, for Nextcloud, I do nextcloud.wieger.com. That hits the reverse proxy and sends it to the right Docker container on Unraid. And so you can access all these things by having different subdomains. So you guys get it. You guys get the point. But so we'll move into kind of the apps I use and what I use them for. But Nextcloud, I have been raving about, you guys know, for like the past few months. Every time I try and squeeze in the show, like my Nextcloud is Jim's version of HelloFresh, right? Jim loves talking about HelloFresh. I love talking about Nextcloud. I love Unraid, but Nextcloud has really been my one true love for the past few months.
I just wish I was known for a technology thing and not a food thing.
You probably are, but recently it's been HelloFresh.
It was Drobo for a while, but nobody.
There you go. So for Nextcloud, there's a lot of different options out here. If you guys are running a NAS at home, if you're running Synology, or I'm sure Drobo has one, QNAP has one, they all have the ability to have a file server. But a lot of those, they aren't as snappy. They aren't as full featured as you really like. Nextcloud, I compare Nextcloud to really a G Suite that you own at home. So when you have Nextcloud is document storage, document syncing amongst all your devices. It can do contacts, calendars as well. So I run everything through Nextcloud now. I don't use iCloud for contacts. I don't use it for calendar. I use Nextcloud for my contacts, my calendar, and my document syncing all in one. And the great part about running your own Nextcloud instance is you can do it for your whole family. So Hannah has an account and she uses it as well. You can share calendars back and forth amongst users. You can share contacts books back and forth amongst users. And really where I think this would shine is if you had a family that was on different devices. Jim, I think actually for your family, if they needed this type of stuff, this is great, because when you use Nextcloud for your contacts and your calendar, it's platform agnostic. Doesn't matter what phone you have, doesn't matter what computer you have. They use the WebDAV standard, so CardDAV and CalDAV for your contacts and your calendars, which you can access really from any device. And then when you go to sharing, again, doesn't matter what platform you're on, you all go back to Nextcloud. And Hannah and I have a shared family calendar. We each have our own individual calendars. We have a shared address book where we can start putting contacts and things like that. Works really well. And then when you combine that with Collabora is an open sourced, essentially think of it as Google Docs. You add that in to Nextcloud. And so when I go to Nextcloud, I can just create from the web browser, create a new document, and it's just like Google Docs. You can do documents, spreadsheets, things like that, all built in. Again, all open source and all free is Nextcloud and Collabora. Can't speak highly enough about Nextcloud. I think it works really well. The setup, it does take some time if you're doing Unraid. I will suggest, if you are an Unraid, Space Invader, his YouTube channel, he has a bunch of tutorials. Unraid themselves promote Space Invaders videos. They put them on their front page of their website. They love him. This guy is fantastic. Follow his tutorial for setting up Nextcloud, and you'll have it up and running, and it's super easy. So obviously that's the big one. That's what my server is mainly being used for. So the next one down, something I had never thought about self-hosting, is a password manager. So if you guys have any interest in self-hosting your password manager, whether it be for cost, which let's be honest, the cost for a lot of password managers is minimal these days, worth it to go with whoever you're with. But if you're more of a security person, wanting that all stored locally, don't want to have to worry about that being stored somewhere else, Bitwarden is a great option. I actually learned about that from this community. So thank you to everyone here who suggested that. I had no idea that they had a self-hosted option, but got that installed. Again, same thing. Got a family set up, right? They call it, I don't know what they call it over there. I think they call it a corporation or community or something like that. And organization, that's what it's called. You set up a different organization for your family. I have put everything in there. We've talked about password managers, but it's the same sense of I have identities for all 4 of us in there. So you can go pull us up, see our social number, all of that. And again, all of it's stored encrypted on my own server, which, a little bit of peace of mind there for storing. So again, both of these. So then there would be bitwarden.wieger.com would, if you're outside the home, get you back into the home page for your Bitwarden vault. And again, that uses the reverse proxy. So the reverse proxy here is key to self-hosting all of these devices. You really wouldn't be able to do it without a reverse proxy, and especially with Bitwarden with Let's Encrypt, because Bitwarden requires SSL connection to function. So you're going to need that SSL. So the next 2 are kind of interesting. Next one down is Grafana. So I have actually it flow through Let's Encrypt, so I can access my Grafana instance from outside my network. And that is because I use Varkin Varkin is another Docker that pulls all of my Plex data and organizes it in a way and kicks it out into a Grafana graph, into a dashboard where I can view. And so I can see all the stats from my Plex. And actually Varkin pulls in from a lot of different sources. So if you use any downloaders or if you use any request engines, so if you set it up where you just type in and it will request the show and put into a request engine for you, it pulls all of that and puts it into one. So it's really cool. So Grafana, another one that I use. And again, I have that running through the Let's Encrypt reverse proxy. Unify controller. This has been really cool. This is one where everyone knows about. If you run Unify equipment for your network, for your access points, your routers, it's beneficial. You don't need it, but it's beneficial to have a controller to view all the dashboard. That controller is what pulls all the data, pulls all the metrics from your network, and it kind of dumps it into the controller and gives you that access to see the data, to control it, to make changes to your network. So I actually host my Unify controller in a Docker container on my Unraid. And the reason I do that is it kind of separates it out. Because most people might use a Raspberry Pi, but this gives it all the horsepower it needs, all the storage it needs. And then it also makes it really easy with the reverse proxy to use it for my outside people. So I manage a few people's networks who also use Unify gear, and all of their networks ping home to my controller. And the benefit to that is I don't need to buy, or the client doesn't need to buy a Raspberry Pi or something to run the controller at their place. And I don't need to get a VPN to get access to it. All of their devices ping home to my Unify controller here. They're all set up on separate sites, and it allows me to have one Unify controller for multiple sites, multiple different deployments of Unify gear. Works really, really well. So if you guys are deploying Unify systems at all, I know you guys probably have. And a lot of people, you either do or don't do the managed services for them. But if you are going to manage their network service, if you're going to be in charge of making changes and monitoring for errors, monitoring for network downtime, things like that, it's a way to do it, because then you only have to log into one controller and you have access to everything. So the next 2, pretty simple. Everyone knows about these. Don't need to go into too much detail, but are Plex and Tatuli. So Plex, obviously being your media server. That's my media server of choice. Usually most people are either MB or Plex. I'm a Plex guy. I love Plex. We use it for absolutely everything here. We use that. And the Tatuli is a super simple Docker container that you guys can install to get data from your Plex on statistics, who's watching what, most watched movies, all sorts of data. If you are running Plex, just install Tatuli. You will be shocked at the cool interface that it gives you and all the data. We already talked about Varkin. Again, that kind of goes along with Plex. It does a different kind of sort of analytics on your data from Plex and sort of things. So if you have a need for Varkin, you'll know about it, and you can. But check that out especially if you share your library with others. I'll say that if you share your library with others, Varkin is a good tool to use. And then the last two, really for Unraid, Time Machine Destination Backup, where in Unraid you can set up certain shares to export out as a Time Machine destination, meaning that the Macs on the network will see it as an option when you go for Time Machine Backup. For those of you who have never touched a Mac, Time Machine is kind of an incremental backup for the Mac where you can you set it and kind of forget it. And then let's say I deleted something last week and I need to go back and recover that. You can, quote, go back in time, scroll through your Time Machine backup to that time and find the file and bring it back to the present and drop it in. So Unraid does have the ability to be a Time Machine destination. I do use that for all the Macs in my house, and it works really, really well over the network, especially now. Unraid released an update not too long ago that allowed for Time Machine to be over SMB instead of AFP. AFP, Apple File Share Protocol, used to be one of the only options for Time Machine, but that has been updated by Apple. You can now use SMB, and Unraid finally kind of released that where you can turn on Time Machine via SMB, and it works much better, a lot less glitchy than AFP was. And then the final one I'll talk about is how I back up my backup. So I consider Unraid kind of my central repository for backups for all my computers. I didn't talk about it, but I do back up all my other machines to the Unraid box. But then it's okay, how do I back up certain critical data from my Unraid box to offsite storage? And I use Duplicati. So Duplicati is really easy to use, streamlined Docker container. You fire it up, you tell it what shares of your Unraid box you want to back up, and it gives you all the options that you would ever want from a backup service. And then you can send them out to local or offsite places. It's really an all-in-one backup utility. You can use it to back up anywhere, but I send all of that to Backblaze. So obviously I don't back up my entire server, but I back up the stuff that would be sensitive that I need if something were to go down, and I send that all over to Backblaze. But that in a nutshell, that's not everything, but that is a majority. That is the main critical stuff that I run on my Unraid box. And Jim, we've talked about this. The great part about Unraid is that all of these that I mentioned run in Docker, which means that I could run a lot of these things on other machines, other Windows machines or Macs, things like that. But with the Unraid box, there's no overhead. And all of these, you can definitely limit their ability to use CPU, RAM, things like that. But I let them all just go wide open, because really the only thing that goes crazy here is Plex. When it's transcoding, it's going to take up a lot of CPU. But these all have almost full access to the CPU, and it's a great way to run all these in a Docker container, especially because they're all siloed off too. If you need to make some changes, blast something away, recreate something, very easy to do. And if you're on Unraid, I'm sure you know about community applications, but if you don't, when you first fire up Unraid, the first thing you should ever install with Unraid is community applications. That is the repository where you can go and find these Dockers, and the template's already built for you. And you can easily, within 2 clicks, install Plex. You can easily, within 2 clicks, install Grafana, Bitwarden. All of these essentially came from someone in community applications.
Oh, super cool. While you were talking, you reminded me I needed to cancel my Plex account. So I was like, and I've been paying
while I'm raving about Plex, you're like, I need to cancel that account.
No, well, I just haven't been using it. Joe offered in the email he'd sent about the cigars, he'd offered to send me a copy of Media Center, because we've been talking about that as well. And I was like, well, I appreciate that. I really do want to move off of Media Center and have a dedicated PC in the living room. That's just kind of one of the things I'm looking forward to getting rid of. And we're going to find a way. When that goes away, we'll find a way to get that done. But I bought the Plex Pass. I wasn't using it. I really was not using it. It just didn't make sense. $5 a month. It's not that much, but I'll buy it again if that's the direction we're going to go. I know it works. I can set up a Plex server or do whatever I'm going to do when we get to that point.
Yeah. I
do have Plex running on the NVIDIA Shield right now as kind of the Plex server, and it's doing its thing. But I don't really need it. I'll take it back if I need to get that done. So it also reminded me I should probably check my credit card to see what other services I've subscribed to. You're mentioning all these things, and it's like, okay, have I done a good audit on my card just to make sure some of the things that I've canceled are actually being canceled? Because you do stuff like this and you start setting up, maybe it's a subscription here and a subscription there for some of the things that you're doing. And then you go, and then you forget about it. Mike, how long do you think, like, you're pretty fast at turnover when we think about technology and like, I'm tired now. I'm going to move on to something else. Is this, it sounds like you got other people involved and you got family involved. Yep. It kind of sounds like you're committed at this point.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty committed, especially, I kind of dope, but a lot of this stuff, I say that, I'm committed to Nextcloud. Like, I love it. I don't think I'll switch just because of how much I love the product. But with all of these, with the exception of Plex and Unify, all of this stuff, I could go out and easily copy this stuff over and I could be off the server in a day if I needed to. Bitwarden, that was the easiest thing to ever set up because it has LastPass has an exporter and Bitwarden imports and you tell it you came from LastPass. That's where I was coming from. And it took 2 seconds. I was up and running. Literally 2 seconds. And so a lot of this stuff in Nextcloud, all that would be is copying it over to OneDrive or Dropbox or whoever I wanted to go to. So the copying time would be the most for Nextcloud. But besides that, a lot of this stuff, if it ever became an issue, I could be off of it. But I really enjoy having it self-hosted. And I think one of the big things here is unlimited storage, essentially, right? I say that, but it's just buying another hard drive. And so I'm not paying a price each month for some of the storage, and I'm not worried about, okay, am I going to go over a data cap? Am I doing it at that? It's self-hosted. I have the backup, so I'm not worried if there's a flood in here. I could be back up and running. Now, would that take me longer than if I was not self-hosted? Of course, because if I wasn't self-hosted, it wouldn't be an issue. But it's kind of worth it, right? Right. Take the odds of this place flooding and that server going out. Also, Unraid is great with if certain components go out, being able to just move to an entirely new box, plug in the USB stick, plug in the hard drives, and it's going to work. It just fires right back up. So I've had to go through that a few times. We've talked about some of my woes with my cache pool crashing with app data and having to rely on backups that I've done. And I've now gotten it down to a science because I've had to do it twice. So I kind of know my backup and restore policies pretty well and how they work. Mark did ask a question. He said he was shocked Plex doesn't use the video card to transcode, and it does. I just don't have a GPU in this rig. I should put one in. I've been wanting to put a but I can't justify spending a couple $100 on a GPU just for Plex transcoding. If I was using it for something else, maybe. But I've been looking to maybe pick up a cheap GPU, something that someone's had laying around, something like that, just to have some sort of GPU transcoding. But it does. So you definitely can transcode on a GPU with Plex, with MB on Unraid. It takes no time at all. There's a few extra parameters you have to add into the Docker template, and then one setting in Plex, and you're good to go.
I do have a pretty nice media center box that's got a bunch of GPUs in it that I'm not really using, so I would make a pretty good Plex box. If I have to come back to it, I will probably.
That would be a great Plex box. Yeah. And especially if you have multiple users trying to, if you had Sammy using it at school, things like that, multiple transcodes, that's where that GPU really does help out.
Yeah, could put a couple GPUs on that box.
No kidding.
So
I wonder if it could use multiple. That's a good question. I know it can do one with no issue. Using multiple, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, our TV consumption right now is just Media Center works. Sarah's really the only one that does it. Sammy's using YouTube for everything. Like or every once in a while it's a Hulu or an Amazon or whatever. And it's just, I don't know. We just don't, right now we're not in a spot where it matters. When that box goes, I feel like there's enough things. I'll be honest, that YouTube TV thing was pretty cool. And that's $50 now.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that price is just.
That's what we rely on for TV.
I'm sure that price is just going to keep going up. I got that feeling. It's so good, and they got so many great things in there, including local channels and sports. And it's really a cable replacement, not a cable cutting thing. And then I'm hearing a lot of comments from guys who say, well, we're pretty much to the point now where I'm paying for much for all these subscription services as I was for cable, or it's pretty close, right? And so cutting the cable anymore, you kind of go, well, do you really want to hunt around for things, or you just want them all in one place?
Yeah. Well, I think
at some point you're going to be pretty close.
I think of it as two different things. Are you looking to replace content to watch, or are you looking to cut the cable? cutting the cable to me means I want to stop paying my cable provider and I want to do something else, or I don't need cable channels. If you need cable channels, though, there are other options. YouTube TV is a cable cutter option, meaning like you're cutting the cable to cable.
Right.
Well, I guess that's not true.
No, because you're still in
you're still
most
getting
cases
cable,
you're
right?
getting
It's
your
not a
internet
cable
through it,
cutting. It's
right?
more of just replacing your cable provider. That's what YouTube TV does. Sorry, I had it mixed up. That's what YouTube TV is doing. If you want to get rid of cable, then you have to that means you're finding other entertainment mediums. That's your Netflix, that's your Amazon, that's your Hulu, all of those sort of devices. But what I was finding was even with cable, even when I have cable, there are shows that I love on Netflix, on Amazon Prime. So I was going to keep those anyway. So those were just those were set. I needed those. We're going to watch those shows. Then it became, how do I decrease my cable bill? Because I also need cable from, in our house. I am not to a point where I can give up on live sports. I'm just not there. And there are other shows that we also really like to watch. They're on some of the cable networks. We were able to give up those, but I said, I can't give up my live sports yet. I'm just a sports nut. It's what I watch every single day. So we said, okay, well, YouTube TV, at least that takes it down from, $100 to 50. Good. That saves $50 a month. We didn't even take into consideration Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and those, because we knew we were going to have those no matter what.
Yeah. I'm finding I'm watching most of my stuff on YouTube. Yep. Just I've subscribed to a couple channels I really like. I have enough subscriptions that I have enough to watch. It's kind of like podcasts. I've subscribed to just enough podcasts that I can't get through them all in a week. So I'm taken care of. Like, there's always going to be something there for me to listen to, something that I like to listen to. And YouTube is the same way. I've got enough things going on that I can catch the shows that I want to watch. So interesting times on that, Mike. That's a great overview of what you're doing. I know we've kind of pieced all those pieces at various times. We had the guys from Lime Technologies on here talking about Unraid. So it's pretty cool. It's just hilarious that we're still talking about this, even though that's the home server stuff from a long ago, but pretty cool. So Mike, thanks for taking the time to kind of work through that tonight. And if you have questions, you can contact Mike. Do that in our Discord group. That's where we have an Unraid group in there. That's probably what this is best for, the average guy.tv.
Yeah.
/
and all that stuff's in the show notes as well.
Discord.
So it'll be listed out there, all the different stuff that I mentioned.
Right. I'll move those over as well. Mike, one more thing before we go. Bitdefender has been kind of been my security. I have the Bitdefender box. I'm on version 2 of the Bitdefender box for those who are keeping score. Been working great. I just upped the subscription again for another year. It's like $100, right? Gets me unlimited Bitdefender across all the networks I'm on. It's really kind of nice because you can just put it on and you're not thinking about it. It defends both the PCs that you have it on, as well as there's some stuff going on the box. It sits right up there. That's why I'm looking up there. And but man, they have really been up in their game on the client. And it is one, I swear to God, they're trying to keep up with Acronis, because Acronis is another one of those companies. They must be making subscription bank at this point, because at the rate they're adding features, and it seems, at least at this point, I've got it on the main PC here. The old days of Norton and McAfee, where those applications were just crap, right? They would just consume everything. This Bitdefender Total Security, that's what I'm running, kind of the full suite on here. Seems really, really light. I'm never like, I wonder if that's the antivirus. And when things start to slow down and you go into your, you go to the Windows Manager and you're like, okay, Task Manager, what's going on here? It's never Bitdefender. And they've just added, they've got antivirus, right? Antivirus, firewall, anti-spam, which is, again, typical. They're doing a bunch with ransomware now. So a ransomware remediation, you can set some standards, you can protect some files so that maybe you keep all your files in a single folder or a variety of folders, and you want to just say, hey, anytime something changes there, don't change it until I've approved it, right? So they can lock that piece down. Some new features, which is, I think, for a lot of people is kind of needed if you don't have some kind of something, or you're not being careful with that. File shredders, password managers, all those things. You can encrypt files on it. SafePay comes along with it, where they'll keep track of those pieces. Webcam protection, right? So it will alert you if your webcam, if something grabs your webcam, other than, in my case, if something grabs my webcam other than Hangouts. Okay, I want to know. right? Want to know that thing is on, if it's on. Although why anybody would want to watch this guy down here doing crypto, I have no idea. Most boring hack of all time, right? Be like, is that guy picking his nose? That's exactly what they would get if they're watching that. They've added a new anti-tracker too, as well. That's the kind of on the newest update where you can install their software in the browser. You can get these on plugins, but for folks that are kind of looking for security all in one place, you might want to take a look. I mean, Bitdefender's been doing some pretty cool stuff in this space, and they have a really nice single app, works pretty well, not very intrusive. I've been using it for a couple years now, and works out pretty well. So one of the things I've been running that on my main box and some of the stuff I use all the time, and then everything else I've just been using Windows Defender on. The Bitdefender does get a little aggressive with the crypto stuff that we're using, and I could exclude it but it's not that it takes zero resources. If you have a really slow or a very old processor, it's not very powerful. They will kind of recommend, if you're like, if I think it's like 1.4 gig or under, they're kind of like, some of the things we need to run are going to take a little bit more on those pieces. But kind of interested in where you've landed. Chat room, let me know right now. Where have you landed on antivirus? Are you using Windows Defender and just letting it go? It's getting some pretty decent reviews. Nothing's perfect, but it's getting pretty decent reviews. Microsoft has added some capabilities too with the web, and it's updating faster and it's getting better. Some of the work they're doing with Azure is making Windows Defender just kind of a better product. Or have you gone with your own whatever? Like to know what you're using. Send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. Love to hear from you on that. It's just one of those. This isn't intended. Maybe if we get some feedback on this, we'll do kind of a security show where we kind of work through some of the options if it's interesting. Love to hear from you, jim@theaverageguy.tv. Mike, anything else?
No, I covered all the.
Yeah. Nice job. Cheers. Good work. I just
talk about Unraid. I was all excited.
I took a nap. While you...
Hopefully no one else. Hopefully it didn't put everyone else to sleep.
No,
it might have though.
I'm super tired, dude. It's been so crazy. I haven't even eaten any HelloFresh. That's not technically true. It was really cute. My daughter, Sammy, she's been on here before. I get a text from her, actually a Facebook message today. She says, Dad, I'm going to be at the library, but if you get home before me, there's a white container full of yesterday's HelloFresh that we saved for you so you can have that for dinner tonight. My daughter, 20-year-old, she's 20. And she's thinking about, dinner for Dad, which was pretty cool. And it was pretty delicious. Even the second day, I think some folks on that HelloFresh stuff, those prepared, I'll be honest, they're fresh. They haven't been the most eaten leftovers. Like
really?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Some of it is it takes a little more, because of the way you cook it, takes a little bit more preparation to make the leftovers. And you're kind of like, I could just cook it.
Yeah.
Right. And where typical leftovers are literally take it out of the fridge, put it in the microwave, take it out of the microwave, eat it. Right. And so some of these you don't want to mix together, right? They got fresh ingredients. You kind of want to warm them up and mix them. And then you're like, could you cook another meal? So if you're still struggling with that, I got a bunch of coupons for it. HelloFresh, just send me an email and we'll get those over to you. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. Mike and I were talking. I'm trying to line up some guests for the future. I've been real busy. I'll get a little more to that after this week, things slow down a little bit. July 4th is coming up. Father's Day in a week. So men, I don't know, milk it for all it's worth. I'm just saying, take advantage of that. It's your day if you're a dad. If you're not a dad, make sure you call your dad or whatever you do, whatever traditions that you have. It's a good day to do that. Looking forward to that. Mike, I wish you were going to be around. I'd come by and maybe enjoy. We'll have to do it the weekend, maybe the weekend after or something.
Yeah.
Together, at least around the 4th, for God's sakes. We got to figure out how to get that done. We also want to thank Christian over at Maple Grove Partners. Of course, get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting over there. Maple Grove Partners. If you want information, hosting as little as $10. He pinged me on Monday. I had a week. I wasn't in at all this. I was coming home at midnight, waking up at 6 and going back into work this week. And on Monday night, he pinged me. He's like, dude, you want a podcast? I didn't even see that message till I came in today on Thursday. I was like, sorry, I can't. I was out all week. We'll try and get him back in and to get a Cyber Frontiers going as well, and appreciate his support of the show. Thanks for doing that. And then, of course, one more reminder, if you want to download the free app for iPhone or Android, homegadgetgeeks.com gets that done as well. We'll see you next week. Hopefully the voice will be back a little bit. My voice will be back, not the voice. I think that's over, but my voice will be back. With that, we'll say goodbye.